With no further ado, I want to introduce our speaker, Eugene Chen. Eugene has been a campaign tech lead since 2017, where he's worked on multiple successful municipal campaigns in that time. He has a focus on data visualization and how it relates to civic tech. He's worked with the World Bank, Imagine Canada, as well as Code for Canada, and he's the co-founder of the Canadian Open Data Society. Take it away, Eugene.
Thanks, all. Well, I'll do a quick introduction. Eugene, Keegan, and I'm very grateful for all of you being here today. Really appreciate it, and hopefully you'll learn something today. Also really grateful for my wife's curry from yesterday, because I'm gonna go to bed and then fly out to Toronto in like a few hours. So that was dinner right there. Awesome. So just a little bit about me. My background is in data visualization. I do a bunch of mapping related things. I'm going to try and keep this short. Didn't want to show you this though. I really like this animation. This is the city of Edmonton based on the building footprint of like when the buildings were built. So what you're seeing then is that from 1917, because Edmonton doesn't have like a sea or an ocean around it, you get to see it kind of like just spread out. So we get a lot of suburbs here. Other sort of visualizations I've done work with. I've also created, worked on data visualizations. This is with the Canadian Open Data Society. This is a directory of all open data portals across Canada. So if you're interested, this is potentially useful. So I wear a few hats, but for today, I'm probably going to talk mostly on the app and the campaign journey, kind of how that worked for me. Also talk a bit about civic tech, because I think that's definitely part of where a lot of this comes from. And certainly, I think everyone's tired of hearing the word AI, but certainly for developers, I think there's a pretty large impact on how you get things done and how quickly you can, and that's part of this. So with that, I mean, I know we already did introductions, but I'm genuinely curious how many people, and I don't know if I can see this, but how many people who are in person or online have volunteered for a campaign in some capacity? I see the one hand because that's my viewing code. I'm just going to nod and say, good job. It's good. Thank you. I am curious about kind of like a little bit about the breakdown and how many people have done door knocking and things like that. Certainly what I'm going to be talking about will be quite a bit about that. With that, just Alex mentioned earlier, I have some campaign experience. So in 2017, Don Iverson in the city of Edmonton was running for mayor. I was a campaign the cabinet tech lead. We won. And then for Andrew's council run in 2021, I had volunteered there, we won as well. And then, you know, most recently the mayoral run just a few months ago, I want to say 6 months ago. And he's now the mayor of Edmonton. So this is my not very subtle, humble bragging. I honestly, as many of you well know, there's a lot of luck that played into this, and I'm just thankful I got a chance to work with some really good candidates. I did want to actually add one more in here, which I thought was kind of neat. This very, very tiny thing that you will not be able to read or see. I was traveling to Vancouver for some sort of thing. I don't remember. I think it was a conference or something. And I had the extra day I had there. And some of you may or may not remember this, Jody Wilson-Raybould. This was many years ago, 2019. She was an independent running for her federal seat. This was after the SNC Lavalin affair. And so I spent one day door knocking with them, and it was a wild experience because my Chinese is like non-existent. And I'm trying to do broken Chinese to people because I guess they saw I was Chinese and they figured I could. Anyways, good memories. And I think I wanted to kind of like mention that more. If you haven't done it already, please give it a shot. Go do some, go volunteer. It doesn't really matter which campaign or which side of the aisle you are, but these were just the more recent one from this past year. Some really good memories for me. And that's really it, right? The thing on the top left is my son. So they had a little bit of a magic party for the volunteers. So he loved it, and I was happy. We went to plant trees in a landfill, which was also really, really great. So really nice memories, and I hope all of you have a chance to kind of do some of that yourselves. I'll start off maybe the journey with maybe a little bit of a start. There's a link to this. I'm not going to go click into it, but as many of you know, money is a very important thing when it comes to campaigns, and so it's really important. With this election cycle, when Andrew was running or thinking about running early on, we knew immediately that there was going to be a large fundraising gap. So by the end of the election cycle, Andrew himself has raised about $250,000. The front runner, or the person who had telegraphed that they were going to be running for a while, had raised over $1 million at that point. So we knew it was an uphill battle, and we knew that it was going to be difficult. And yeah, we needed to basically, the strength would be the team, right? The volunteers to be able to make a difference and find ways to do things differently. It's not to say that, I think they still ran a pretty good campaign on their end, and there are other candidates, of course, as well. But there are a lot of different factors. But this kind of goes through a bit of a breakdown on the spend for the different mayoral candidates. And in this case, Andrew had the least in terms of the amount of fundraising that he got and what he spent to the votes that he ultimately got. So funding is an issue, right? And just yeah, you want to be able to put money where it's going to be most effective. So one of the first things we did was, I kept out some of the details here, but I figure for some of you, you might find this interesting. Did a bit of the cost analysis early in the campaign to try and identify what were our options in terms of door knocking, ground game software. And one of the key things, because I had been involved with a number of different electoral cycles, I had seen kind of the same sort of software and the same sort of packages. I'm a little bit disappointed that many years later, it's still pretty much the same thing, except just more expensive. So we did a bit of a breakdown as to what it would cost. And then we also did a little bit of what we call an environmental scan to identify the pros and cons, to weight different things, to see, if we weight turf cutting, or data integration, total costs, some of the features like offline use, what would that look like? What decision could we make at the end? So went through a bit of process there. And this sort of analysis, I think, is really useful. I'm more of a developer and a coder, but from time to time, I have to wear a PM sort of hat. And so, yeah, I just thought this would be the sort of like good analysis you might have questions about later or whatnot, but I think this is cool. The other thing, besides for cost, was this is us or me. There's a few of us who are trying this. We're trying out some of the software, and it was a few WTFs is basically what it was. Lots of, we're trying to just create an account to just start doing door knocking at a place. There are a few of us together. We're trying to figure it out. It's just absolutely painful. Didn't manage to get it done within the hour and a half that we were there. And so figured, that was another thing to consider. With that, I'm going to go through more of the app part because we're limited time. But I would say I'll show you show you essentially what there was an original one, and this is what I ended up building with the team in different ways. And the whole journey is really a what if we could sort of question, right? So with that, it's a question of what if we could have something that allows us to have turf cutting that was really, really straightforward and easy. So these are the turfs. If for those of you familiar with door knocking or turf cutting, of course, I do this now, and then it's going to not. Demo time is just going to fail on me because I leave the tabs open forever. Never do that, I guess. Yeah, anyways. So turf cutting, if some of you are familiar with this, it can be a bit of a painful thing, but this is all I do. I just draw the corners of where I want to cut the turf. I press that, and then it'll just tell me that we've cut in York Center and under this particular neighborhood. So instead of spending time and painful time to try and figure it out, then that's what we did. The other thing was, what if we could just have like a simple app that we would allow for like door knocking? So I'm just zooming into this particular area. I clicked on the turf, and so you could just go and say, okay, I was over here, or you could turn on the GPS. It's not going to turn on because you want on mobile here, where this is just a browser. But I click knock, and I can say I have no response, skipping. And then the what if we could sort of thing comes up, right? So we want to be able to measure and track, support levels, whether or not they're for the candidate or not the candidate. But throughout the campaign, you start realizing there are other things that people wanted. So you start off with some of these simple questions, and then like, we have lawn signs, and then we have advanced lawn signs. Okay, is it going to be on a wall somewhere? Is it going to be something else? So, and you have to build it in. And then early voting, right? People have already voted for you or not. So it'd be good to be able to capture that information. So we start building and building and building with these sort of things. And then you start thinking about, well, okay, that's great. We now have something that's better than a Google form that allows us to have the app. We can walk around with it. That's great. But what about coverage? So then you ask the question of like, what does it look like in terms of like, how much did we cover? And so now you have a visual way of being able to tell what proportion of these turfs have we covered? Do we have left to cover? And then the other thing that you do is like, people can be a little bit competitive at times, like who did the most, and who did the most in the past week, who did the most today. And so it was just a bunch of small things that kept adding up, in some of these analytics, and what we call velocity anyway, which is just to know, okay, within this last week, we did this much. We had over 1,000 canvases. What does it look like in terms of rhythm, in terms of increasing our capacity to get people to come and to be able to door knock with us? And then one of the final two things I'll show here, assuming this works, and it does, but I forget this thing needs to probably be in here. It's not gonna. Anyways, one of the core things that you want to decide for once you have some of this data is to decide where you put your effort down the road with, right? So you ideally have knocked on a number of these places, and you can see that there's a spread of support in different areas. But if you look at it, you might want to go to, let's say, this neighborhood here, where there is a 72% of the people who you door knocked have supported your candidate, versus, let's say, one of these neighborhoods over here, where there's more non-supporters than supporters, right? So then you start to make some decisions of, okay, we have so many flyers, we have so much effort, so much time by volunteers, what can we do? Can also do fun things like, I don't know, just actually take away all the grays, the unknowns, the door knocks that don't result in anything. You just look at the pure ratio. And then if you wanted to look at the overall totals, just because like their ratio is really high in one place, just maybe because you have a small sample size. And then you start looking at these larger areas to determine, okay, you know what, we have this effort, so why don't we go flyer or door knock this neighborhood for GOTV? And yeah, that's basically it. It's a very short presentation. I figured I didn't want to get you all to be waiting for too long. Maybe I'll just show one more thing, actually. There's also things like buildings as well, which reminds me, if any of you work for the City of Toronto's open data portal or department, please reach out. I have questions about data, about some of the data. But yeah, if I go into the ground view, or essentially what I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see this. You can then see the proportion of these buildings where you see the proportion of what's covered from these areas. And then like, I think this one in particular had like 79 buildings, 79 units in this particular area. So then you're able to say, okay, which ones have you knocked on? Which ones have you not knocked on? That sort of thing. Yeah, that's awesome to read on the text. Yeah, I might have rushed through this a little bit, but I figure people might have questions, so I'm done. It's a very short presentation. Oh, while I'm out there, I guess I'm flying into Toronto to like in like hours here, and then I'll be at the Democracy Exchange conference, and I'll be in Toronto till Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday I'll be in Waterloo, so I'll be in your neck of the woods, and I will bring my slide back to this particular slide here, which is, I think, is just the finished slide. Yeah. Okay. There's a website to this now that I put together so that if people are interested, they can reach out to ask me about it because I have it I have it set up so that it works for different cities now. I have Richmond and Vancouver and obviously Toronto, but it's built in such a way that it doesn't take long to put that information in so that it can be used for whatever municipality. And yeah, okay, sorry, I keep saying I'm stopping, but yes, I'm actually stopping.
Thank you so much, Eugene. We did give you a round of applause in the room, but let's give another one just because. Okay, so we're going to go to Q&A now. So the way this works is we'll alternate between in-person and online. If you are online and you want to ask a question, please drop a Q in the chat. If you're in person, raise your hand. And just a reminder, if you're in person, that you need to wait until you have the microphone so that people online can hear you ask that question. I did see that Chadu has a question, so.
This is a two-parter. First of all, incredible software, very cool. Thank you for showing us. I'd like to inquire about the success metrics in using the software in opposed to maybe the traditional way of tracking canvassing, which I think maybe be like physical sheets, physical media. How has what metrics did you look for, or are you looking for, of this being successful? And just to clarify, has this been tested in any recent campaigns? It looks like it was tested in Andrew Clark's, maybe.
Yeah. Great. So thanks for the question. I appreciate it. The two-parter is, I think the point of success is whether or not you use the data to do something with it, whether or not you better understand your constituents. And I make the case that I don't think I need to make a case. I think from our campaign, I think we're fairly sold on the idea that you're able to capture people's concerns more effectively and then be able to, on a campaign side of things, start making some decisions with your limited resources of what to do. By virtue of those two things, I think you can consider that like a metric of success. There may be other ones, but those are the ones that for the campaign, and this is to answer your second question. Yeah, we used it for our campaign. Like this was, we didn't have paper canvassing at all. This was what we had. And I mean, I will give you another, it's a bit of a bias metric, admittedly, but the feedback that I've gotten from this by people who are leads in other campaigns for provincial or federal campaigns has been really, really good. They've all told me to kind of pursue this and try to bring this forward. I guess my final kind of potential metric for success is, I don't know, I think of this as a bit of a civic tech sort of thing. I'm curious to see if this has enough legs to then turn into something that is potentially I'm not trying to become a billionaire and millionaire from this, but if this pays the bills and it allows future leaders to be able to better understand their constituents, I consider that my wins.
If you want a quick follow-up, sorry. While using this software, how accessible was this for people who weren't technically maybe technically literate? And yeah, I wanted to inquire with that. That was actually my second part of this question, but yeah.
Fair. I mean, it's hard to tell, but I mean, I'll say the overwhelming response I got was, this was great. We had grandmas and everybody else using it. I had different people who don't use technology. I mean, all it was you go up to them, you get them to scan a QR code, right? And we have to add them in because we need to verify who they are. But that's all that was needed. And then they immediately starts door knocking with the rest of us. I'm a bit biased though, I gotta say. Thank you.
Sorry. So this is incredibly impressive. This is a vastly better version of the first software I ever made and the last software I've made. I was a 16-year-old door knocking, and the software we had was worse than it is today, barely. So my question is, how available is this going to be for all of the future campaigns I ever touch?
Well, thanks for that. And look, first of all, I commend you from going down this path even at 16, because God, I don't know if I could have done anything close to even thinking about doing that at that age. Uh, yeah, the short answer is I want this to be as accessible as possible. I gotta tell you all, like this, you can tell me your thoughts about this. I have been the one thing that I've been struggling with a lot is pricing. One thing that I wanted to do with this is I heard and talked to some folks that I know out of BC and they want to use this. And one of the concerns they have is with data sovereignty. So instead of putting it the cheapest, cloud service, I have to go find a service that's located in Canada or like a data service that's a data center in Canada. And so it's pricing at this point, right? Trying to figure out what that looks like. Everybody that I've talked to has told me to up the price. And my flip side thought of this is if I make it cheaper, more people will have access to it. Council boards will be able to use something like this. So the short answer is I want to make it as accessible as possible. But I don't know what that means, because I've also been told that if you put it down too cheaply, nobody's going to care or want to use it either, which is a weird thing, but I think they're right. So yeah, that's it. I hope that makes sense. I'm more than happy to make this as available to everybody as possible.
This is not a question. I'm cheating here, but I've talked to a lot of people in your position, and there's a wonderful thing of offering discounts. So set the price higher, and then when you want to lower it for people who need it, it's a thing, yeah, like bursaries and scholarships for university.
Did you get a chance to talk to anyone who can remember how to do canvassing by paper? Because some of the questions in the room related to, is this better than doing things by paper? I could answer that question having done paper canvassing, but I'll leave it to you to answer that.
I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I could very well be wrong about some of these things, but I will say a couple of things. One, we like the first campaign that we did mostly paper canvassing. So there's a bit of like seeing how that worked and the transition throughout, and there are pros and cons. The one thing I'll also let all of you know too is like this doesn't cover flyering, because I think flyering works better on paper for now as well. I'm hopeful that we can potentially change that calculus. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Generally speaking, the campaign and everybody else has been happy for it to move to the purely digital side of things. But you have more experience than I think maybe some of us do. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, my question here is, I noticed that you use the address points on the homes. I'm wondering if you use Toronto Open Data for anything else outside of that, maybe like the dissemination areas. You can get like a property count by type, things like that, or even like, statistics like average household income.
That's a great question. So what's not on here is like there's some additional stuff that you want to do before a campaign starts. And that is to basically figure out analytically demographics around particular areas. So in this, not so much. Generally speaking, yeah, you probably do want to take different data sets, and I have done that for our races to be able to maybe take a look at other things like prior history of the elections for particular voting stations. But yes, this is currently mostly using open data. But I'm sure this is not a surprise to many of you. I don't know if I should say this out loud. Not that big of a deal, I guess. I'm genuinely frustrated at the fact that the assessment data in Ontario is behind a gated wall. The same happens for BC. And I recently looked at a quote for getting some of that data, and it will boggle your mind how expensive this stuff is just to get that data. So disappointing. I'm glad I live in some sense in Alberta, or at least in Edmonton, where the open data has that information, that has that detail. But yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat that? Your wish. We couldn't hear it all in the room. It was a lot of people. Yeah. We couldn't hear you clearly.
Oh, I wish for
Ontario and data.
Yeah, data should be more closed and behind the fingers of people who are rich and powerful. That's what I think we should do.
Got it. Sorry, that was very funny response. Just curious, a quick question. How many people have been using this so far? Approximately.
I got to look at the stats. I think we had, I don't remember for sure, but with the original one, I have been making improvements for the last few weeks because someone out in BC wants to use it, and so like, okay, well, if we're going to do it, I might as well do it for Ontario as well. I think in our campaign we had around 100+ registered users around there. Wasn't that many, but you know, it was just a one race, so I thought it was pretty decent. Also, I think we had some cheating going on, where certain people decided to share their accounts with other people, which was funny.
And not a question, just as a parent of a kid in Scouts, something like this would be very useful for on Apple Day where they're all in different areas to give parents mind. So I just that's what I saw. Yeah.
No, that's fair. And in fact, one thing that I didn't show you all is some of the conversations I had was actually not so much about campaigns. It was this idea that, sorry, not about election campaigns, this idea that you might actually want this for different purposes. So say you're a nonprofit that wants to potentially get a better sense of the opinions of your membership or people that you want to get together to for some particular cause, right? And so then the idea is you might have different engagements. Right now I have door knocking and canvassing here. Within the campaign, election campaign, idea is that you might have your initial door canvassing, and then you would move on to maybe a GOTV sort of a sprint or engagement. But in the back of my mind in the code, actually, it's allowing it for different sort of use cases like the one that you just talked about. Although it's one of those dangerous things where I know, at least with visualization, you start trying to do too many things at once, you never do it good enough. So kind of try and focus on getting at least a few campaigns to do, not even ideally to do well, but for them to have a good understanding of themselves and the people they want to serve better. And I think if we can do that for a number of campaigns this year, I think that'd be really good.
I'm curious about the spreadsheet you showed earlier, where you showed different options
Sure.
in the market and how well each of them address different needs. I'm curious about how this software compares to, I guess, those set of needs. Does it address everything, or does it become one piece of software that has to be used with other software?
So I'm still screen sharing, and the short answer is, I mean, this is this option 5 was this software, and in fact, it was a poor excuse for the software because I didn't want to overpromise. I was like, okay, we could do maybe this thing, and then maybe we could do this thing. Okay, let's see what that would look like. Certainly, things like the cost was better, right? If you had to do a cost analysis and you weight the cost some amount, it would do fairly better. But the turf cutting, for instance, if any of you have done turf cutting before, it is a painful, surprisingly painful thing to do digitally. There's no way it should be that difficult. So yeah, so there were some things that I figured we could do a lot better. And that's what ended up happening for this. And so the feedback I've gotten generally was, yes, to answer your question, this was option 5. And it was very close to option 1, where we would have otherwise had to spend close to $30,000.
Hey, I put my hand up for the question, but I'm actually deflecting because I heard there was someone who had a brief knowledge on the technology of paper canvassing.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember paper canvassing, and I've had the role on campaigns, many campaigns of managing paper. I've been continually staying in touch with recruiting volunteers and their availability on campaigns. There are far fewer people available to volunteer in political campaigns. So if you can reduce the pain and annoyances related to political campaigns, you'll get more work done. Managing paper is the least enjoyable for most volunteers. Getting them out to canvas is actually more useful and generally more pleasant. One of the problems that you save, one of the solutions that digital system saves is all that paper management and also the data errors. Because if you've ever had to process handwritten forms, there are all sort of problems just interpreting people's handwriting. That's solved. The tool provides the map. So you're not creating a whole set of maps. You don't have a team to generate these turf cut maps and handing and distributing them and collecting back in. It's a whole bureaucracy that a system like this or any of the paid systems eliminate. So there are a lot of savings in any digital campaign tool. And most of the younger volunteers expect this kind of a tool. The number of people who can still remember how to do the paper canvassing and all the bureaucracy around the paper canvassing, most of them, in my experience, are in the retirement phase and would be quite happy to pass the whole campaign logistics off to someone else.
Add two quick comments if that's okay. I think, yeah, I think that those line up well with what we've seen. In fact, yeah, I've had to help campaigns kind of figure out their paper maps, which is always a pain because the effort for a lot of them isn't that much less in terms. Well, it just isn't. And then the one thing when you talk about meeting people where they are, what I really like about this general idea here, and I'm sure the other software pieces do this to some extent, but just the ability, like if I live here, I see that these turfs are open, I'm just gonna go door knock those ones, right? Like I don't have to like wait for someone to do some sort of coordination. Like they're just here. I'll just go to the one that we have and we want to target, and then it's just done. Yeah, so that's that. Something else I was going to say too. That skipped my mind, but yeah.
We have time for a couple more questions, I think. Go ahead, Ilya.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Might be true to type, but I'm curious about your thoughts on opening the data that comes from within this app. Because I very much like agree with the mission of, a campaign should better understand its constituents. But there being like a public resource on what people's concerns were would be, I think, like beneficial to the public as a mirror of itself. I recognize that there would need to be work put into not personally identify people, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, you've been around open data. I'm curious about your thoughts on that, even as an option.
I love it. I love the idea. Yeah, I think ultimately it'll come out of the campaign and whether or not they think keeping that data is going to be a competitive advantage for them or not. And I can see certain candidates thinking that this is a public good and releasing that information in that sort of form. So I love the idea. This is one that I'm going to likely just put as an option for those who, because one thing that has come up in the discussions and also in the work that I've done with this is capturing notes for people's issues. Well, we're still a little bit on the fence, like with different campaigns about the idea of in the same way you have support levels for this where it's very clear. It's like a 1 to 5. But if you actually had issues that you had that for, that would potentially give you kind of really good, interesting insights to how certain neighborhoods think about certain things. So yes, love the idea. Happy to chat about it.
Hi, Eugene. Thanks very much for this. So 2 quick questions. One is this strictly for collecting marks, or is this also usable for like deep canvassing to kind of like get at more longer qualitative type issues? A second question is this integrated with any of the existing constituency resource management tools? Thanks.
Yeah. So just to answer your questions, is this something that works in a deeper sense, like beyond potentially a campaign? It currently doesn't, But my hope, as I was mentioning earlier, is I think it should. And I've had a few people come up to talk to me specifically about those use cases, not about the campaign ones. Yeah, so I think that makes sense. And then your second point, shoot, I apologize. I'm like running on fumes and I haven't slept for a while. So what was your second question again?
1 second, I just have to run back to Brian in the room.
Basically, do you have any integrations with existing CRM tools, or is it
Right.
putting out a CSV that people then import?
At the moment, it's likely just going to be CSV, just because integration implies a few different things. I'm also unfamiliar with some of the other CRMs you're talking about as well. It's a newer world for me, and part of the reason why I even built this was thinking about a CRM for instead of like I don't like this idea of like people are interested in your opinions and learning opinions of other people around you when the elections come. So I'd like for that to not be the case. But realistically, well, it's not even realistically. I learned, for example, that if you go and you take office, you have city CRM stuff that you should be using. And you shouldn't be deviating from that. So I don't know what that looks like outside of a campaign cycle, but certainly for other longer term goals or nonprofits, I think that makes sense.
Okay, let's give one more round of applause for Eugene.
Thank you all.